My sister hugged me that night. And when I felt her tears on my cheek, I knew something terrible was about to happen. I didn't know what, but a mother's heart never lies. It was December 15th and I had just returned from the hospital after being admitted for pneumonia for 3 days. My lungs were still weak, my breathing was labored, and the doctor had been very clear. I needed complete rest. My family seemed so concerned, so attentive. Carmen, my younger sister, had even stayed over that night to take care of me. Before I continue with this story that changed my life forever, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about where you're watching from. I'm sure my story will touch your heart. That night, I woke up to a strange smell. At first, I thought it was my medication, but then I recognized that sharp, chemical scent, gasoline. My heart started racing as my eyes adjusted to the dark. The house was silent for a home with 5 people living in it. I struggled to get up, my legs trembling from weakness, and walked to the living room. The smell grew stronger with every step. When I reached the kitchen, I saw something that froze my blood, a shiny puddle on the floor, damp stains on the walls, and on the sink, an empty gasoline can. At that moment, I heard the most terrifying sound of my life, the click of a lighter. I turned around and saw my own brother, Eduardo, with a look I didn't recognize. It was the look of a stranger. "Forgive me, Mercedes," he whispered. There was no other way. The flames began to consume my kitchen, the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of Christmas tamales, where I had comforted my children when they cried, where I had celebrated every birthday of this family that now betrayed me. I ran toward the front door, but it was locked. The windows were too. My breathing became harder, not just from the smoke, but from the horrifying realization of what was happening. My own siblings, my own children, had planned this. The heat was unbearable. The flames quickly spread to the curtains my mother had hand-stitched, to the furniture we had sacrificed so much for. But what hurt the most wasn't losing my things. It was realizing that my own family had decided I was worth more dead than alive. Then I remembered the whispered conversations I'd overheard in the past weeks, the family meetings I had been excluded from, the strange looks when I mentioned the life insurance I had renewed after my husband's death. $200,000. To my struggling family, that amount must have seemed like the solution to all their problems. Carmen had lost her job at the textile factory 6 months ago. Eduardo was 3 months behind on rent, and he'd been threatened with eviction. My eldest son, Roberto, needed money urgently for a problem he never fully explained, only that it involved dangerous people and a debt that grew each day. And I, Mercedes Valdemar, 52 years old, a widow with no minor children, a paid-off house, and a substantial life insurance policy, had become the perfect solution to all their problems. Or so they thought, as I desperately searched for an escape, with smoke burning my eyes and filling my already damaged lungs. I remembered the conversation I'd had with my godfather Augusto the week before. He had warned me that sometimes family could be more dangerous than strangers, but I had laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. "Mercedes," he had told me as we drank coffee on his porch, "I've seen things in my 70 years that would make you lose faith in humanity. Greed turns people into monsters you don't recognize." The fire now roared like a hungry beast. I managed to reach the bathroom, where I turned on the shower and soaked a towel to cover my nose and mouth. The cold water on my body gave me a moment of clarity amidst the panic. It was then that I remembered the small bathroom window that led to the backyard. It was narrow, but I had lost weight during my illness. With the strength I had left, I climbed onto the toilet and forced the window open. It was rusty, resistant, but fear gave me superhuman strength. I managed to get halfway through the window when I heard voices outside. It was my family, gathered in the corner, watching my house burn, watching their perfect plan burn. I could make out the silhouettes of Carmen, Eduardo, Roberto, and even my sister-in-law, Esperanza. All there, waiting for the flames to do their dirty work. But that was just the beginning of a night that would change our lives forever. I fell on the other side of the window like a sack of potatoes, scraping my legs against the rose bushes I had planted with so much love. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in my soul. My lungs burned, my body trembled, but my mind was clearer than ever. From my hiding spot behind the shed, I could hear their voices perfectly. Eduardo was on the phone with the fire department, faking desperation. "Please, come quickly. My sister's inside. She's very sick. She can't get out alone." Carmen was crying theatrically, clinging to Roberto. Oh, my poor sister. My God, why did this have to happen? Her performance was so convincing that for a moment, I doubted my own senses. Esperanza, always the most practical, was already calculating. The insurance will ask a lot of questions. We need to have the story straight. Mercedes was very weak. She was on strong medication. She might have left something on in the kitchen. I stayed hidden until the firefighters and police arrived. I watched as my family acted out the drama of grief and despair. Roberto even tried to run into the house to save his mother, heroically held back by 2 firefighters. When they declared that no bodies had been found in the house, confusion was evident on their faces. But quickly Eduardo improvised. She must have completely disintegrated. The fire was too intense. I waited until everyone left, until the fire trucks disappeared into the early morning. Until my family returned to their homes to plan how they would collect my life insurance. Only then did I come out of hiding, shivering not just from the cold, but from a fury I had never felt before. I walked barefoot through the streets I had known since I was a child. The streets of our neighborhood where I had grown up, where I had gotten married, where I had raised my children. Every corner held a memory. But now all those memories were tainted by betrayal. I arrived at my godfather Augusto's house when the sun began to rise. He opened the door in his pajamas, his sleepy eyes immediately turning to horror when he saw me, covered in soot, my clothes torn, barefoot and trembling. Mercedes, my God, what happened to you? I told him everything. Every detail, from the gasoline smell to the calculating voices of my family planning to collect my death. Augusto, who had been a police officer for 30 years before retiring, listened, in silence, his expression growing darker with every word. Girl, he said finally, this is attempted murder. You need to go to the police right now. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Without solid evidence, it would be my word against that of 4 people who had already built a convincing story. Also, my family had contacts in the local police. Eduardo's cousin worked in the investigations department. No, Godfather, I said, feeling something harden inside me. I need more than words. I need proof, and I think I know exactly where to find it. Over the next few days, while my family mourned my death publicly and discreetly began the insurance process, I carefully planned my revenge. It wouldn't be violent revenge, but something much more devastating. The truth, Augusto helped me get a new cell phone and a small camera. He also lent me money to buy clothes and rent a small room at Dona Remedio's boarding house on the other side of town. Officially, Mercedes Valdemar had died in the fire. But a new version of me, one that knew exactly who my family really was, had just been born. What came next changed everything forever. For 2 weeks, I became a ghost, observing my own death. I wore wigs, dark glasses, clothes I had never worn before. Augusto had taught me basic surveillance techniques from his days as a cop, and I applied them with a determination that surprised even me. The first revelation came on the 3rd day. I was hidden behind a car, watching Carmen's house, when I saw a luxury car pull up that I recognized immediately. It was Patricio Herrera's car, the most dangerous loan shark in the neighborhood. The man who collected debts using methods I'd rather not mention. Roberto came out of Carmen's house and walked up to the car. I saw him hand a thick envelope to Patricio, who counted it carefully before smiling and giving my son a pat on the shoulder. We're square now, kid. Your mother was a very valuable woman, wasn't she? My blood froze. My own son had bet my life against his debt, literally. That night, I followed Eduardo to a bar downtown. I saw him meet with a well-dressed man I recognized as an insurance agent. But not the agent who handled my policy. This was someone different. Someone who seemed to be explaining the steps to speed up the insurance payout. The normal process takes months, I heard the man say as I discreetly approached. But when there are special circumstances, like fire and disappearance of the body, we can do it in weeks. Of course, my commission for speeding up the process is 20%. Eduardo nervously nodded. No problem. Just ... Are you sure there won't be any further investigation? Don't worry, buddy, I have contacts at the company. As long as you keep the story straight and there are no suspicions, everything will go perfectly. I recorded the entire conversation on the phone Augusto gave me, but I still needed more. I needed the definitive proof. The following week, Carmen made the mistake I was waiting for. I followed her to the bank, where I saw her open a new account. Then I followed her to an electronics store, where she bought a huge TV, paying in cash. A TV that cost exactly what she had received from selling my jewelry. My jewelry. The jewelry that was supposed to have been destroyed in the fire. That night, I dressed completely in black and went back to what was left of my house. The remains of the fire were still there, with yellow police tape surrounding the property. But I knew every corner of that house, even in the dark, even reduced to rubble. I went straight to where my bedroom used to be, specifically to where my vanity was there, under what had been my bed. I dug with my own hands through the ashes and debris. My nails broke, my fingers bled, but I kept digging until I found what I was looking for. The small safe I had installed years ago, hidden under the floorboards. The fire had been intense, but that safe was designed to withstand flames. Inside were my most important documents, some family photographs I hadn't wanted to leave at the bank, and something even my family didn't know existed, a folder with very compromising information about each of them. You see, for years I had been the family confidant, the older sister, the one who listened to problems, the one who kept secrets, the one who helped without asking questions. And as a good older sister and protective mother, I had always kept a record of the help I gave, the loans I made, and, yes, also the shady things my relatives did. Eduardo not only owed rent, he had been arrested twice for selling drugs, something he had kept secret from his wife. I had the photos of his police booking and copies of the legal documents. Carmen hadn't just lost her job. She had been fired for theft. She had been selling confidential company information to the competition. I had the firing letters and the internal reports she had shown me, crying, begging me never to tell anyone. Roberto had the worst secret of all. The debt with Patricio wasn't for gambling or drugs. It was blackmail. Roberto had run over and killed a child while driving drunk the previous year, and Patricio had been a witness. Instead of going to the police, Patricio had decided to charge him a monthly silence fee, and Esperanza, my dear sister-in-law, had a double life that even Eduardo didn't know about. She had been embezzling church funds where she worked as a volunteer accountant, stealing money from donations for the poor. With this information in hand, I smiled for the first time since the fire. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but something much colder. It was the smile of someone who finally had all the winning cards. But what I found next, in that same safe, was something that completely changed my plan for revenge. Something I didn't even remember having put there. Something that would turn my pain into the most poetic justice they could imagine. At the back of the safe, wrapped in plastic, was my late husband's secret will. A will that changed everything. Absolutely everything. Miguel's will was dated just a week before his death from a heart attack. He had never mentioned it to me, but now I understood why. As I read each line with a small flashlight, sitting among the rubble of my burned house, I understood that Miguel had known something I never suspected. The document was clear. Miguel had discovered the illegal activities of my family. He had proof of everything. Eduardo's shady dealings, Carmen's thefts, Roberto's blackmail, and Esperanza's embezzling at the church. But instead of confronting them directly, he had done something much smarter. He had completely changed his will. The house, which I thought was mine because I was his wife, had actually been left to a charity foundation, with the condition that I could live there until my death. My life insurance, which my family coveted so much, had a secret secondary beneficiary. If I died under suspicious circumstances, all the money would go directly to that same foundation, and a private investigation would automatically be triggered. But the most devastating part of the will was the last clause. Miguel had left copies of all the evidence against my family with his lawyer, with specific instructions to turn it over to the authorities if anything happened to me. In other words, by killing me, my family would not only get nothing, but they had condemned themselves. The next day, I went to the office of Miguel's lawyer, Licenciado Morales. Of course, he nearly fainted when he saw me walk in. According to everyone, I was dead. Mrs. Mercedes ... but the fire ... they said you were dead. I told him the whole truth. Licenciado Morales, a man in his 60s with 40 years of legal experience, listened to me with a mix of horror and professional admiration. Your husband was a very wise man, he finally said. He came here very worried, saying he feared for his safety. I never imagined his concerns were so ... literal. He showed me all the evidence Miguel had gathered. Photos, documents, audio recordings. My husband had been investigating my family for months before his death, probably suspecting they would eventually try to hurt us. What do you want to do, Mrs. Mercedes? The lawyer asked me. I have authorization from your husband to take legal action against them all. But I had a different plan, a plan that Miguel would have approved of, knowing his sense of humor and love for poetic justice. That night, I returned to my hideout and carefully prepared my return from the dead. I decided that my resurrection would happen during the family meeting they had arranged to divide up the insurance money they hadn't yet collected. According to my surveillance, they were meeting Saturday night at Carmen's house to discreetly celebrate Mercedes' memory and plan what to do with the inheritance. Saturday arrived with a torrential rainstorm, as if to foreshadow what was to come. I dressed completely in white, a dress I had bought especially for the occasion. I styled my hair exactly how I used to when I lived with them, and I carefully applied makeup to look pale, ethereal. At 8 o'clock, as the rain lashed against the windows, I knocked on Carmen's door. When Eduardo opened the door and saw me standing there in the rain, his face transformed into a mask of pure terror. The glass of whiskey he was holding shattered on the floor. "Hello, Eduardo," I said in the softest voice I could muster. "Aren't you going to invite your sister in?" The screams that came from inside the house when Carmen and the others saw me were delicious. Roberto completely passed out. Esperanza started praying aloud, convinced I was a vengeful ghost. But Carmen, always the smartest, was the first to realize I was very much alive. Double quotes, Mercedes, ... how ... You were supposed to. Supposed to what, sister? I asked as I slowly walked into the living room, where insurance documents and calculations on how to divide up my money were scattered. Was I supposed to have burned to death in the fire you caused? The silence that followed was deafening. All that could be heard was the rain and my family's heavy breathing. It was then that I pulled out the folder I had prepared. A folder that contained copies of all the evidence, the recordings of their conversations, photos of their crimes, Miguel's documents, and of course, the video I had managed to record of Eduardo setting my house on fire. "Now," I said as I placed the folder on the table, "we're going to have a very long conversation about family love." What followed was the hardest and most liberating conversation of my life. For 3 hours, the rain poured outside as I confronted 42 years of family lies, manipulation, and betrayal. I showed them every piece of evidence, explained every detail of what I knew, and watched as they crumbled one by one. Eduardo, the brother who had been my protector in childhood, cried like a child when I showed him the photos of him buying gasoline the night of the fire. Carmen, my soul sister, went silent when I played the recording where she coldly calculated how to divide up my money. But the most painful conversation was with Roberto, my own son. When I told him I knew about the child he had run over, when I explained that I understood his desperation but not his decision to kill me over it, I saw the final thread that connected us break forever. "Mom," he whispered, I thought ... I thought you were really sick, that you were going to die soon anyway, and that at least your death would serve for something ... Serve for something," I replied, feeling my voice crack. "Was my life worth so little to you that you could trade it for money?" There was no answer to that question. There couldn't have been. At the end of the night, I gave them an option that Miguel would have admired. They could choose between two paths: face the legal consequences of all their crimes, including attempted murder, or accept my personal justice. My justice was simple but devastating. Each one would have to publicly confess their crimes, return everything they had stolen, and then disappear from my life forever. Eduardo would move to another state, Carmen would give up her attempts to collect any inheritance, Roberto would turn himself into the police for the hit and run, and Esperanza would return every penny stolen from the church. In exchange, I wouldn't present the evidence to the authorities. One by one, they agreed. Over the following months, I watched as each part of my justice was carried out. Eduardo moved to Tijuana and I never heard from him again. Carmen sold everything she had bought with my money and went to live with a distant cousin. Roberto turned himself in to the police and confessed to the hit and run. He's now serving an 8-year sentence. Esperanza resigned from her job at the church after returning the stolen money and went to care for her sick mother in the village. I returned to what was left of my house and rebuilt it from scratch. But this time, I built it only for myself. No extra rooms for relatives who betrayed me. No big kitchen to prepare family dinners I would never have again. A small, comfortable house, surrounded by a garden full of flowers I planted with my own hands. I never collected the insurance money. Instead, I used the property Miguel had really left me to create a small foundation that helps women who are victims of domestic violence. Because yes, what my family did to me was domestic violence, of the worst kind. Some days, when I water my flowers in the morning, I wonder if I will ever forgive my family. The answer changes depending on the day. Some days I feel compassion for their desperation that led them to betray me. Other days, I feel deep sadness for everything we lost. But every day, without exception, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for having survived, for having discovered who my family really was before it was too late, and for having found the strength to build a new life, one that is authentic and free from lies and betrayal. My name is still Mercedes Valdemar, but I'm no longer the woman who almost died in that fire. I am someone who knows exactly what her life is worth, and who will never again let anyone put it in danger. If this story touched your soul, give it a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever lived through a family betrayal? How did you find the strength to move on? For the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for joining me on this journey of pain, discovery, and rebirth.